Hello, Herm Gailey here. We're going to be talking about what I think of as the 7 deadly sins of rein aids. 7 really rude things you can do to your horse with your hands. The list could be a lot longer. I'll tell you, I got a cheat sheet because I can't remember past 3, but number 1, we're going to get started. Number 1 is too quick with your hands. I think that's the commonest thing that you see. People will want to do something quickly, so they think they got to speed up their hands. So you'll see somebody riding around. Now, if I want to stop him, even if I want to stop him promptly, I'm just going to plan ahead, compress my seat, pick up on the reins. You don't gain anything by snatching. So very often you'll see people, and you can see it builds a brace. The horse automatically wants to brace. Flies are bad today. They automatically want to brace. So don't go too quick with your hands. When you're stopping or when you're steering, you'll see people steering like this. That's just awful. Sorry, buddy, but that's how it goes. If you want to steer and you need a little speed, maybe use your leg. And you get something a whole lot more pleasing. I didn't even get to 2. The other thing, very common, second thing, very, very common. Your reins are too long. You want your hands out in front of the saddle horn. Soon as you get back in here, you lose all your mechanics of your arms. So you're back in here going, and anything can happen. If you're up in here, you're in a kind of a gearbox. You're in a little area, a little square, where you can operate your horse in a meaningful way. And that goes just as much if you're riding one-handed as if you're riding with 2. In fact, commonly you'll see people get their reins too long with one hand, and they're not quite quick enough to get their reins gathered back up, and they're in a bad place. If you want to lengthen your reins, say you're showing your horse and you're one-handed, if you want to lengthen your reins, extend your arm a little bit. But then if you need to steer your horse, see your hand's still in that gearbox. If it's back in here, you can put a nice long rein out, but here's what happens when you need to gather it up. So reins too long, very common. Whoa. Third thing that we see pretty often is people whose hands are just too busy. And it's interesting, you see this across all disciplines, people who are always doing this. Now, because that hasn't been done to him, you could say, but look, he's responding. Well, he's responding because it means something to him. I promise you, ride around like this, jiggling your hands, doing little meaningless half halts, doing little checks, and you will dull your horse's mouth out. Use your hands when they mean something. So if I want to get him a little deeper in the bridle, I put my hands on him, or if I want to slow him down, I want my hand to mean something to him. Whoa. If your horse doesn't respond to your hands, instead of just nag, 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 so suppose I'd asked him to slow down and he blew me off, or he speeded right back up. Well, you could go nag, 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 or you could take it through a stop or even a backup and say, when I take a hold of your face and restrain you, it means to slow down. That way, when the money's on the table and you ask him to slow down, They do, because they know they could end up going back the whole way through a halt or even a backup. The other thing, a close cousin to that, is your hands are too constant. Your hands are always on your horse. You know, maybe you think you want to ride with contact. Well, riding with contact doesn't mean what I'm doing here. I'm pulling back on him, pulling back on him, pulling back on him. And when he gives, I pull back more. My hands are constant. And I've got his neck bent like a pretzel. And he'll put up with that, but after a bit, your horse will dull out from that just as much. And believe me, they will learn to pull back. If you want to hold your horse in a frame, set your hands and drive your horse to your hands. It's that concept that's in another video called pull to a point. See, I've driven him to that point, and there's release for him. Drive him to the point and release him. But don't drive him to the point and keep holding hard. Set that hand, drive your horse to it, and reward him when he's responsive to it. So we're up to number 5, hands too high or too low. I think everybody's sort of familiar with the hands too high. And that was somewhat of an example. The first thing I did where I had my hands way up here and I was real quick. If you got your hands up here, you're going to pick your horse's head up. You're not going to be in a mechanically advantageous position. Hands around the height of your saddle horn, probably about right. It's going to vary horse to horse. It's going to vary a little bit depending on what you're doing. Woo. The other thing, and people don't think of this as a negative, is hands too low. If your hands are too low, you see people doing this. Well, I'm going to get this sucker's head down. And they're out here like this. I mean, they got their hands plenty low, and the horse's head is coming down, but it's just mechanical. There's nothing but restraint there. He's not learning to do anything but lean against your hands. You will not be able to show in any discipline with your hands in this position. So other than maybe once in a while on a colt, I just would never use it. The other thing you see pretty often is just pulling too hard. Just plain pulling too hard. Pretty straightforward. We're going to take about a 1-minute break. There's some equipment coming in, and we'll start right back up. So we're back. We had a little break for some equipment coming in that was pretty loud. We just got a whole winter supply of hay in the barn, and they're taking the wagons away. Best feeling in the world is having a barn full of hay and knowing you got enough for the winter and it didn't get rained on. So we're talking about the 7 deadly sins when we were up to simply pulling too hard. And I'm going to pull too hard on this poor horse. You see this to a large extent in the stop, but people will stop, they want to stop, so they go, oh. They'll throw themselves back, put their full weight on the horse's mouth, and just yank on him. Now, if you were to watch that back, and maybe we can figure out the slow motion and put that in on slow motion. You can see how that puts a brace in your horse. That if you need that much to stop your horse, you probably need to back up and do something a little more elementary to where you just don't need to do that because it's ineffective. A lot of horses will rebel against it, and do it enough times you get a horse that either has an incredible brace or who pulls back or gets belligerent. Can't blame them. You want to stop your horse like this. If you could see that, it was too hard. You just sort of slink down in the saddle and compress your hands. And you can soften your horse up to where you don't need to pull on him hard, and then for gosh sakes, don't. So we're up to number 5. No, that was number 6, and number 7 is pretty common. And a lot of people don't know they're doing it. Your reins are uneven. You see that a lot. So you'll have this inside rein, you can see it's real long. The outside rein is much shorter. And you ride around, and what that'll do is that'll cant his nose to the outside. And if you go to trot him around, you're going to have him kind of inverted, and you're saying, well, what's wrong with him? I think I'll pull on him a little bit. And see, my reins are too long and they're uneven, and I got a double whammy. You can see how ineffective that is and how that bends him out of shape. So you need to gain the feel. Even if you have to look down for a while, if you're not real experienced, to where your reins are always even. Uneven reins are a real unfortunate thing because it just bends your horse out of shape. Too much inside rein and you'll be saying, hey, where are you going? Where are you going? Well, golly, he's going where you told him to. So those are 7 deadly sins. There's more. Get us a comment and tell us your nomination for the 8th deadly sin. And tell us which one you think is the worst and the most common. Always like the comments. Hey, subscribe, like us, come back and see us.